Kia ora, hello, vanakkam. You are watching Sarah in Between. My name is Sarah. I'm a second generation Kiwi-Indian living here in the beautiful Aotearoa, New Zealand. And on this channel, we talk about what it means to be a woman of culture, a woman of color, and how faith can inform our stories and how we can find purpose in the in-between. As you would have seen in some of my previous videos, I talk about the experiences of being a third culture kid, or as other people like to call it, a first or second generation immigrant, depending on when you moved from your home country to a new country. And there are many struggles that we face. On the one hand, it is a blessing that to be biracial. It is a blessing to be a part of so many cultures. It is a blessing that our parents have given us to grow up in a Western country, to grow up in countries where there are better opportunities, where there are more opportunities than they have had. And they have sacrificed so much for us to have the things that we do in our life today, and nothing should ever take away from those things. But there is a path that we have to navigate, mostly on our own and mostly without a manual or a guide as to how to live a life in a country or in a place where you are the same but not the same. So here are some things that I struggled with as a first generation Kiwi-Indian, having moved from India when I was around 6 years old. We moved to New Zealand and I still had my Indian accent. I still pronounced things differently. I dressed quite differently as well. And it was really hard to navigate a space where I kind of fit in, but I also didn't. I sounded like everyone else and I also didn't. I fit in some places and I didn't fit in other places. And there wasn't really a model for this is how a first generation immigrant should grow up. These are the choices they have to make. These are the challenges that you will face. And this is how you can overcome them. And so I hope that this video can be a source of that for you if you are watching this and you are have just moved to a new country, or if you have been a first or second generation immigrant for a really long time. Number one, navigating the stereotypes. Stereotypes, they are everywhere. Indian stereotypes, you would have heard them pretty much everywhere on social media, especially at the moment. And when I first arrived in New Zealand, I was very fresh off the boat and looked like I was definitely from India. But my parents had more of a say about what I wore, and so I had like these color coordinated outfits and matching hair clips and matching handbags, which I have to say are very fashionable at the moment, but were not when I was 6 years old. And I said the letter H as etch, and a 5-year-old on the first day of school very matter-of-factly told me that my accent was wrong and that I was pronouncing things wrong. And my name, Sarah, was actually spelt with 2 A's at the end, which is a more Indian way of spelling my name, which people found really strange. I was very hairy at a young age, and I had so much body hair, and people definitely let me know that that was the case. And everywhere I went, kind of my teachers would be like, wow, you actually have really great English, you know, for having been from India, you know, you can read and write so well. Like, yeah, I can. And I also could not bring any of my Indian food to school for lunch because, one, it had a really strong smell, which attracted a lot of attention, and two, it was really hard to eat. So I had to eat like these like boring sandwiches, and half the time I wouldn't even eat them because all I wanted to do was eat my Indian food. But looking back, of course, you know, now I know sort of my likes and my preferences, and I'm very confident about who I am, and I am not so hidden away in the things that make me me. But now I can see who I am and whose I am, as we talked about in a previous video, and I can live life knowing now that I am made exactly the way that I was meant to be in this way, and that both my cultures have purpose, but stereotypes can stick and it can make you really confused as to how you want to be perceived. And I was definitely a very confused third culture kid. Secondly, thing that I struggled with the most and still struggled with to this day is making and keeping friends. And only recently I saw on a post on Instagram somewhere they were talking about actually it's very typical of third culture kids or children who grew up in a country different from their home country or moved around a lot to find it really difficult to make friends. And I felt really seen when I saw that post. But when I was growing up, my parents would pick me up really early from school events, more than the others. I would have people come to me like, oh, your dad is here to pick you up. And that was really embarrassing to me, and I wasn't allowed sleepovers. I didn't have my own phone till I was in uni, by which time everyone had already gotten like Snapchat and Messenger and Facebook, and I think Facebook was pretty much out by then as well. But I wasn't allowed to go to friends' houses too much unless my parents knew them really well. And we also did move around a lot, not just from India to New Zealand. We did obviously go back to India quite often. We moved churches many times, and so I also didn't really fit in with the general social culture that is here in New Zealand. I didn't really drink. I didn't really like small talk, which I still don't really enjoy very much. And to be honest, back then, the things that my parents did that I saw as alienating me from my friends or being different from what my friends could do, I'm actually now really grateful for, because we see so many terrible things happening to kids and young people, and you never know what will happen until it does. And so while everyone else got to do things that I could not do, which felt really terrible at the time, and it often made me feel really excluded and lonely, and because I wasn't there when all the cool things happened. I wasn't there at the things that people were talking about the next day. And so growing up, it's not as easy to make friends as a third culture kid, and we do in fact really become good at fitting in and adapting in with different environments, because that's kind of what we have to do. But it also makes it really hard to keep friends, because we don't know what long-lasting relationships look like, and we move around so much that we don't have the opportunity to invest in those things. As a result of most of the things that I've just mentioned, fourthly, I had a huge confusion around who I was and my identity. And of course, this is something that every young person has to deal with, and every young person has something that confuses them about who they are. And that's honestly what youth is for, to kind of figure that out. But I did have a lot of confusion around, do I want to be really white or do I want to be really Indian? Can I trust people? Can I not trust people? And it wasn't just at school or work or later on at uni. It was also in the churches that I was growing up in. And I was the only person at school, and I would be one way at school, I would be one way at church, I would be one way at work, I would be one way with my family and with my friends. And I actually remember sitting down and telling myself that I actually didn't know who I was, and I didn't know which persona I actually wanted to claim as my actual original personality. And I didn't know who I was, because neither side seemed to be totally fulfilling on their own, and they didn't really seem to mix either. Of course, this came into conflict with who my parents wanted me to be or thought I was going to be, or the ideas that they had for my life or the way in which they wanted to bring me up, which is obviously really difficult for them because I was growing up in a foreign country in a culture that was inherently different from theirs. And because of all these things, I sort of really questioned myself around, do I want to be really white? Do I want to be really Indian? Can I even be both? Can I trust people? Can I not trust people because of the stereotypes that I have faced? And this led me into a large part of my life where I had a different personality, a different persona, depending on where I was and who I was with. So I would be kind of the good Christian daughter while I was at church. I was at home. I was obviously a really good student. I was a good daughter. I was doing everything that my parents wanted me to do. At school, I was a good student. I had to be high achieving because that was the only thing I had going for me and the only thing that kind of gave me some kind of status at school. And but I would also delve into my more rebellious side because obviously my parents weren't there and they weren't watching, and I had a certain level of freedom to do the things that I couldn't do at home or church. There was also, I guess, not just my own understanding of who I wanted to be, but also people's perception of what they thought that I should be. For example, white people expected me as an Indian to sound a certain way, to behave a certain way, or even to behave more like them, to sound more like them. And this was not all people, by the way. This is just a few people and experiences that I have had that led me to the challenges that I had. And to Indian people, I had to be a certain way and I had certain expectations. And there was also the whole, I never really fit in a white community because I did bring a lot of my Indian self and the way that I looked and I sounded to that table. But then to the Indian community, it was like I was too white and I was too westernized, and so I wasn't really truly Indian, or I didn't truly belong. And so it was kind of like Moses, I guess, where he is essentially a bicultural person and he was born into one culture but grew up in another, and he actually names his son Gershom, saying, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And I kind of feel like a foreigner in a foreign land for a lot of my life, and I think it really captures the struggle that we have with identity and feeling like an outsider everywhere. And so this leads me to my fifth point about reconciling faith, reconciling our cultural faith with a more westernized version of faith. And what I mean by this is every culture, the Christianity that is practiced in every culture is actually quite specific to their community or their language or their ways and means of doing things. For example, the church that I grew up in India is very traditional, and we have quite large structures in place and traditions in place and certain things that need to be done, certain people that have certain roles. Whereas when I came to New Zealand, the church culture was very casual and everyone was kind of equal, and it was very casual and light, and services went on for like 45 minutes and we were used to sitting in church for like 2 or 3 hours. And so I guess white Christian kids also, when we would hang out with them, you know, they'd have a lot more freedom about how they lived their Christian life as opposed to how I knew how to live my Christian life, which was still quite conservative and quite modest. And there were certain elements to Indian Christianity that were very Indian-based and tradition-based, and the same for the white churches that we attended. It was very reflective of the culture that we were living in. And so there was no model as to this is how you live as a person of culture and as a person of faith. This is how you honor both sides. And it was really difficult because I did want to live a good Christian life and I did want to be a good Christian person, but I just didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know that I didn't have to be a Kiwi Christian or follow Kiwi Christian ways of doing things in order to be a good Christian. I could be a good Christian just from where I was, from my own culture and how the people before me have lived out their faith. But all of this changed for me when I saw the beauty of the things that make me me, including my culture, including my parents, including my family, including the things that I've had to experience to get to where I am today. And I think a big realization that I had, and I think a lot of third culture kids and first and second generation kids and young people should also remember, is that everyone has challenges in their lives. Everyone has something that they come up against, something that they think they wish could be different. Oh, I wish this could be different. Oh, I wish I had a different family. Oh, I wish that I could do the things that I wanted to do that my friends are doing. And everyone grows up with some aspect of their lives, of themselves, of their friends or family that they wish could have been different and doesn't quite fit. And when we get the stereotypes and when we feel the loneliness and we struggle and strive over who we are, we remember that we were made on purpose and placed in our families on purpose, that we were handpicked, that our life is a story that is being written by God, and that He has an end goal in mind, and that He made us this way for a very, very good reason. And if he knew us before the foundations of the world, then He knows exactly what He was doing, and He knew what you were going to face, and He actually has the things that you need in the palm of His hands. Secondly, things really changed for me when I saw some of my Asian and my Indian traditional values as not always being in conflict with biblical values. And I never thought about it like this. But as I began thinking about how my culture and my faith could intersect, I realized that there are so many values that I grew up with, that I actually grew up hating, that are actually biblical and things that God has called us to. For example, modesty. For example, honoring your parents, even when your views or opinions differ from them. Making sure the company that we keep is good. Making sure that we don't date until we are actually ready, until we actually get the go from God. Or not skipping church, not neglecting meeting together in community, in your communities of faith. And when we realize that below the surface, God is still working and He is still using the parts of our lives that we want to cut out, that we think aren't cool, that we think are holding us back, but actually are shaping us and molding us to be better Christians, I think that's when things really shifted for me, and I really began to see that all of the things that I had faced and all of the things that I really wanted to run away from were actually things that helped me to be a better Christian. Finally, a lot of these things started to shift for me, and I started being more comfortable in who I am and in the different parts that make up me, when I really started digging into God and to who He was and to His word and keeping an open line of communication. And I actually realized that the more closer I got to God, the less heavy the burden seemed to be, and the more I started seeing His hand in my life. For example, one of the first things that I remember, a point in my life when I really knew that I was starting to get close to God and that He was changing my life, was when I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't lie to my parents about anything, because while before I could just lie about anything and everything, it literally rolled off the tongue. It was my first instinct, my first reaction, because that was the only way I could do the things that I wanted to do and do the things that my friends were doing. And so it just came so easily to me. But once I started getting closer to God and closer to His word, and closer to where He wanted me to be in my life, I just could not lie anymore, because even the tiniest lies that I told felt like a huge weight to me, and I felt so much guilt over them, and I just had to tell the truth. And the more I became attuned to God, the more my attitudes around certain aspects of life, my cultural life, my bicultural life changed, and the less I stopped trying to control the outcomes of my life. My speech changed, my goals changed, my relationship with my parents changed, my perceptions about who I am became stronger and more rooted and grounded in who God is. And now I actually see that I am so much like my parents and I am so much like my ancestors, and that my story and the person that I am, my own personhood and the way that I am, is so influenced by the people that have gone before me and the lives that they have lived. And so being a third culture kid, or a first or a second generation bicultural person, and or even an adult can be really challenging. But for those of us who know whose we are and who we are, and actually start to walk in that and what God is calling us to do, farther along we really begin to understand that God was actually there all along, and that God works through all of these things that we feel like we want to run away from and feel like we don't want anything to do with, because He has never left us and He has never abandoned us. Even in the moments that we have abandoned Him for making us a certain way or for giving us certain things, He was still there and He was still working, and He still works through your very own culture, your very own experiences, your upbringing, your family. He works through each and every single one of those things. None of those things are a mistake, and He works in and through them for His glory. I really hope you have enjoyed today's video. Let me know in the comments if you have struggled with any of these things before yourself, and I will see you all in my next video.